Hi, Janis. How you doing?
I'm doing real good. How are you?
Doing great. It's incredible that you're here. Let me just show everyone who you are and what you've done. I mean, this isn't a brand new book. How long ago did you write this first one?
Oh, I wrote that back in 2017.
2017. Oh, not that long ago. Okay, so Janis Gillham Grady is one of probably the only person still alive today who has your experience with L. Ron Hubbard, the early days of Scientology, the flagship Apollo.
Yeah, there are two others that are alive. They were close. My sister and Claire Popham, who is actually still in Scientology from what I've heard.
Oh, wow. I've never even heard of her.
Yeah. Well, there was 4 original Commodore's messengers. Myself, I was the very first. My sister, Annie Broker, and Claire.
Wow. Okay, so for the viewers, L. Ron Hubbard called himself the Commodore. Scientology's management, all of Scientology management is composed of staff members who are called Sea Org members. They've signed billion-year contracts. The Sea Organization was roughly patterned after the Navy. A lot of the terminology is the same. L. Ron Hubbard was in the Navy. And L. Ron Hubbard called himself the Commodore of the Sea Organization. So one of the earliest, biggest ships in the Sea Organization was called the Apollo.
Yes.
And a lot of Scientologists from all over the world would come to the Apollo. And eventually L. Ron Hubbard used their children as his messengers. How would you describe, what was the role of the Commodore's messengers?
Well, I wouldn't say eventually used them, because it was the first thing he did when he moved on to the Apollo, which was called the Royal Scotsman at the time. He had actually been on the Avon River, which was a much smaller ship. And when he moved over onto the Royal Scotsman, it was too big for him to get around to find people he needed. So his son Quentin was assigned to actually stay with him and run around. And then after 3 hours of doing that, I was called upon to run around and find people for Hubbard. And that then formed into the 4 of us messengers every day, 6 hours a day. We did 6-hour watches, 24 hours. And anything he needed around the ship, we ran off and did it, or he needed to send a message to someone, we ran the message or took them dispatches and that type of thing. And that's how it all started. And that was in May of 1968. And I just turned 12 years old.
12 years old. 12 years old. Okay, so this started immediately upon L. Ron Hubbard using this new large ship. But why were you already there?
Why I was there is my mother had joined the Sea Project probably around July 67, with the promise that her 3 children could follow. And she had no idea what to expect or anything. She ended up in Hull, England, renovating the Avon River, chipping paint and cleaning fish yuck from the decks and stuff. Anyway, finally, in December of 67, after LRH got the bigger vessel, she got his permission to bring us over. So we arrived the end of January 1968 on the Royal Scotsman, and I'm 11 years old. We come aboard and we're looking for our mother, and we're told that she sailed the day before. So she wasn't even there, as the 3 of us are like, what do we do? So Mary Sue, Hubbard's wife, said she'd be our guardian until our mother got back. And we were assigned to the dormitories, and then we were given jobs in the galley, in the kitchen, to basically work to exchange for our beds and food. So my sister and I was 11 and she had just turned 13. Were assigned to washing dishes for maybe 200-300 people on the ship, and I'd stand on a little crate in order to be able to reach out of the sink.
Wow. Okay, so you are essentially, I mean, in today's terms, we would call that indentured servitude, child labor, labor trafficking, all this kind of stuff.
Slave.
Slave, yes. how did it feel at the time?
It was kind of unreal, or because when we went down there, we thought we'd be in a house.
Oh.
we didn't really think we'd be living on a ship, and so it was kind of very eye-opening, or unrealistic, kind of going through a dream, and your mother's not there, and you some of the people from the days at St. Hill, but it was definitely a different lifestyle.
So how long were you on the ship without your mother?
Well, I was on the ship for 8 years, from 11 to 19, and my mother was never really on the ship for that long. She was always sent out on mission, and then around late 68, after she became a Class 8 auditor, she was sent to LA. And then from there, from 1968, late 68 until 75, she probably came back to the ship 3 times.
Really?
And I went to LA maybe 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
And that was the amount of time I saw her as a teenager.
So your mom joined the Sea Project with the condition that you'd be able to follow her. I almost retrospectively asked, what was the point if you guys weren't even going to be together anyway?
Well, exactly. And she thought we were all going to be together. And I even years later asked her, I said, why did you allow us to stay on the ship while you were in LA? Because she set up Celebrity Center. And
oh, your mom's Yvonne.
Yes. Yeah, my mother is Yvonne Gillham, or Yvonne Jentzsch. And so she set up Celebrity Center and stayed there. And she said that she had petitioned LRH to have her children sent to her. And it was denied because he needed us more.
Wow. Damn.
And it was interesting because I used to think, well, why is he knowingly keeping us separated from our mother, who, when he was the one who kept saying, don't separate families. And I even watched him call someone to the ship because it had separated a husband and wife, but he never did that with our family.
Wow. So the other messengers that were working with you and your sister, were they in a similar boat? I mean, were they also there without their parents, most of them?
No. Claire's parents were there the whole time. And Annie's parents were there up until 1972. And then her mother got pregnant. And so she was moved to our shore base in Tangiers, Morocco. And when we closed that out, she moved to Denmark. So Annie's mother was there until Annie was about 16.
Wow. And so eventually the messengers went from just being, well, I don't want to say just. Okay, when you guys were just running messages for LRH, was there already a sense of seniority amongst the messengers compared to the rest of the crew? Or were you just seen as like errand runners? No,
we were just errand runners. And what happened over the years is, being teenagers, we'd do stupid things, and people would call it the messengers did this. Or when we got promoted to midshipmen, we became the middies. And it was always, oh, the middies are ashore throwing rocks or throwing potatoes at the U.S. Navy, And it became a generality of the messengers or the middies. And so all of us would kind of get grouped together, whether it was 2 of us involved or only 1.
Oh, right. So you're talking about seniority within the messengers themselves. But I'm talking about, were messengers already seen as essentially having an elevated position over all the rest of the Sea Org members?
That came later as we grew. I myself never considered myself senior to other people. It was my job to run the message and relay it the way Hubbard wanted me to relay it. And there were times where I didn't relay it the way he wanted it relayed because I was not a vicious person. And sometimes I would even say to the person, you don't want to say that, say this instead. You know, so that, because I knew how he would react to different things. And as a messenger, you had to just work with people in order to calm Hubbard down, because he could be explosive. But as in seniority, we, as young kids on the ship, we were very friendly with a lot of the crew and hung out with different crew members and so forth. And as Hubbard then expanded our duties, that became more of people looking at us more senior, where he would say, grab an e-meter and go and word clear, blah, blah. Oh, okay. I'd done some e-meter drills, went back at St. Hill, but I hadn't done them in several years. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say to him, I haven't done that. I got to go do it.
Wow. So at what point did the messengers become the essentially governing body of Scientology?
That was 1979, I believe it was, when we'd moved to California by then, and we were now in Hemet. We'd just purchased the Gold Base, and Hubbard was at a apartment building in Hemet, which we called X. And so he was kind of off the management lines, and that's when WDC was created. So
real quick, just for the viewers. So Gold Base is located in Gilman Hot Springs, California. And it's called the Gold Base sometimes.
Yes.
Because Scientology has a movie production studio called Golden Era Productions that is located on the base, right?
Right.
And is it my understanding that the base's PR with the local community is that all Gilman Hot Springs is Golden Era Productions? They don't want anyone to know that international management is there.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So they portray themselves to the community as just being a movie studio.
Yes.
But really it's Scientology's international base, or at least used to be.
Yes.
These days.
I don't know how it is these days.
These days, Scientology Media Productions in Hollywood is the new int base.
Okay, right.
Okay, so I cut you off there. Oh, because you were saying you guys had already moved to Hemet and the Watchdog Committee. Let's tell everyone what the Watchdog Committee is.
So the Watchdog Committee was set up by LRH to cover different sectors like the Flag Service Org here in Clearwater, and another one to cover the Sea Org organizations, which is more of the advanced organizations in the St. Hills. And then another WC member covered all the Class 4 orgs, which I believe are now called Class 5 orgs.
Right.
But at the time they were Class 4. And then there was another one who covered the Mission Network. So they covered different sectors.
So this was essentially a committee composed of the most senior messengers, and as a committee was essentially the most senior management body in Scientology.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And it was their job to oversee the executive director of internationally, and the Flag Bureau, international management, and even the mission management. They were to do everything. And he didn't want it known as to who they were. And actually, one time the Flag Bureau was asking, who are you guys? So we all put bags on our heads and a photo was taken.
No way.
Yeah. And a photo of these bags lined up was taken and sent to them as to, here's the Watchdog Committee.
I mean, at this time, it was no longer just a bunch of teenage girls, right? You're all grown up. How old were you at that point when the Watchdog Committee was created?
Well, I wasn't part of the original Watchdog Committee because I was doing other projects. But we would have been 21, 22.
So a bunch of girls in their early 20s running all of Scientology.
Yeah.
Not terribly dissimilar from what it still is these days, in a way. I mean, not that it matters that there are a bunch of girls, but I think society at large would find it interesting that the management structure of Scientology does tend to lean very heavily female.
Yeah, I believe it does. I mean, Hubbard never had anything on whether they were male or female. It was, can they do the job? And that's how you have like Hannah Eltringham. She was the captain of the Avon River because she could do the job.
I wonder if there's something to be said for the fact that the women were perhaps just more successful at being able to deal with Hubbard's tantrums. I mean, is that I mean, I'm kind of just pulling that out of nowhere, but it seems to me that you could just naturally have more friction between two, battling male egos, perhaps. I mean, it just kind of makes sense to me. I don't know if it's true.
I'd never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely had a male ego.
Okay, so
yeah.
Well, so then in Mike Rinder's book, there's the early part of his story is him arriving onto the Apollo again, sort of under false pretenses. Thought he was arriving for something completely different than what he was actually arriving for. How long do you remember when Mike Rinder arrived to the ship?
Yeah, I remember Mike well. We were good friends, and we're still good friends.
And so, were you guys similar in age? I mean, you guys are similar in age,
No,
right?
well, he's maybe a year or two older.
That's similar in age.
Yeah. It is as you get older, yeah. But at that time, no.
Oh boy. So let's see. I think people wonder some very specific things about Hubbard. One, they hear these stories of all these young girl messengers running around, and they think there was definitely something nefarious going on there. And yet nobody ever, hardly anyone has ever even implied that there was. What was your experience?
He never came on to me. Never. And, and I've talked to other messengers too. And, because we got more and more messengers and so forth. And the majority have all said he never came on to him.
I've only heard one exception.
Right. I've heard one exception too.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think the other fascination, the question I get most often is, did he really believe everything he was writing and telling and coming up with, the OT3 story, the prison planet story, all the past lives stuff? What's your take on that?
Yeah, he believed it. I honestly feel he believed it and did not feel he was conning people. He did not live I hear stories of DM with these $5,000 shoes or suits and that type of thing. LRH was not like that. He had some suits. He had a wardrobe, but it was not this massive thing. He did have his own steward and his own food and his own cook, but he lived on a rusty old ship and not in elaborate quarters or anything. It was the stateroom. So it was not an elaborate life. And he stayed up till like 3 a.m, 6 a.m, 8 a.m, sometimes working on not just management, but CS and PC folders. So if there was sessions that day, he would stay up until that whole pile of PC folders was CS'd. So, and that means he's gone through them and supervised and told the auditors what to do next session.
Right. Right. So it does seem to me, and also based on the testimonies of everyone who has worked with him, that he definitely believed in what he was doing, even if he seemed to pretty easily lie about the details of it. I mean, and I'm curious to know if you agree with me on this, because let's take Dianetics, for example. It seems pretty clear to me that Hubbard believed he had come up with some mental health science that could be the everyday man's psychotherapy, and that he thought it was great. And yet there's no way he believed the things he wrote in Dianetics about what a Dianetics could do for people. There's no way he believed that.
Yeah, there are things that are contrary, and he did believe that if someone got hurt, using Dianetics is going to run that incident out and they'll be fine. And if they weren't fine, then he believed that the process wasn't run properly.
Right.
And that's how he looked at it. And he also stated many times when people got in trouble for out ethics, he always felt that before the out ethics existed, there was out tech on the case.
Right. So he definitely seemed to believe what he was doing from your perspective. No question about that. The other thing I hear people wonder about is his explosive temper. What was your experience with L. Ron Hubbard and his temper?
You never knew when he was going to blow up. you could be on a message run and he's happy and fine about what you're telling him. And then suddenly you might have said something wrong and he would just, no, that's not what I meant. And then he'd just be yelling and screaming about it. And you're like, okay, let me fix that. And you run off. And then you talk to whoever and you work it out and you come back and say, okay, it's handled, and you calm him down. And I remember, it's not yelling at us, but it's to us, where as a messenger, you'd stand in front of his desk and he would just be yelling and red-faced and in a rage about something. And you just had to acknowledge him and let him know that you were going to handle it. And then he would calm down. And one lady, she was walking by the window on the promenade deck of the ship. And she says to me later, she says, how can you just stand there and let him yell at you like that? And I'm like, well, he's not yelling at me. You know, I didn't do what was wrong, but someone's got to acknowledge him, because if no one else is going to acknowledge him, it's going to get worse. And that's how
so this is really interesting, because as you're talking about, a whole bunch of stuff going through my head, and it has to do with various contradictions in what L. Ron Hubbard said a manager is supposed to do versus what he actually did. In Scientology, there's something called the admin TRs, the administrative TRs, the administrative training routines, the communication drills on how to be an effective manager. And one of them is being able to repeat an order essentially an endless number of times without getting flustered, without getting upset, without getting anything, in order to obtain compliance.
Right.
And yet that never fits with my experience in the Sea Organization. There's not a single Sea Org executive who's going to give you an order 1,000,000 times without losing their temper. And yet that is what you're supposed to learn on that one particular admin TR. I guess I'm just sort of throwing this out there.
Yeah.
What do you make of contradictions like that, where, because I never worked with L. Ron Hubbard, it's easy for me to go, well, every Sea Org executive is just, failing in their proper application of admin TRs. And yet you can go, well, no, LRH didn't even use those admin TRs.
No. Well, and here's another example is in Scientology technology, we have a reference HENR.
Yeah. Human
Emotion and Reaction. And when he would be yelling like this, I'd be thinking, well, wait a minute, that's HENR. And I'm like, how does that fit? Because it was contrary to what the tech was.
Right. And it's funny because now in modern present day Scientology, it's easy for someone like a Miscavige to use LRH as a crutch and pretend like he was great and magic and perfect and the epitome, the embodiment of everything Scientology says is supposed to, essentially be a full OT. But he can only do that because Hubbard's no longer here.
Exactly.
Those who worked with him knew, no, that's not what he was like.
And Miscavige didn't work with him a lot.
Right.
He wasn't with him for years, like us original four, and then even the three that joined us in 1970. So there were 7 of us then until 73.
Yeah. So at the time, though, did it strike you? I mean, you're pointing it out as a contradiction, and that you even thought it was a contradiction then, but did it really at all cause you to go, like, really question things, or it's just a passing thought?
No, you've got to realize I was a teenager.
Yeah. And
everybody around me praised Hubbard. Kind of, some godly, some not, but I would then put those thoughts to the back of my head, because I'm like, if I say that, I'm going to be getting set checked, for having these bad thoughts. So I would kind of put them to the back of my head and try to blank them out so that it wouldn't come up.
Right.
And I never discussed it with the other messengers, because you just don't do that.
Right. I remember when I was like 13 or 14 studying at Flag, and I had a passing thought of, it was kind of a combination thought of, I'm not really sure what is the reason why we all take L. Ron Hubbard's word for everything. Like, it's the first time it was dawning on me that I didn't understand why we were treating one person as like the true source of all knowledge. And I remember sitting with that thought for a little bit and going, if somebody asked me that question, what would I say? And I was more concerned with what I would say than whether I actually believed it or not.
Right.
And then so what did you guys think of Hubbard?
Well, let me just go back on what you're saying. When the false data rundown came out, and everyone had to be, they had to be referred back to as to where their false data came from, and then they would be shown what Hubbard wrote on that subject. And that got me thinking as well, because it's like you go, here's a perfect example. The gardener was told to get some nutritional rods to put in the ground around some trees. And he read the directions, and it said to put it around the umbrella of the tree. And so he did that. And then Hubbard comes down and is talking to the gardener and finds out he put him around the umbrella. He's like, no, I told you to put it around the inside roots. And he got really mad at the guy. Now, right there, if you're doing false data stripping on this guy, what that box said on how to put those in would be wrong.
Because it was contrary to what Hubbard said.
Right. But you know that all those nutritional things, research was done as to where they worked best, where the roots reach, not in by the tree.
Right.
So that's where I started questioning the false data stripping, because it was always the correct source of the data was Hubbard, not what the box said after research.
That's right. That's right. I've never seen a video actually break down the false data stripping procedure or the detection steps that you run through to determine if either someone might have false data or if something is false data. It all comes down to, is it contrary to what L. Ron Hubbard said?
Exactly.
What did you as a young child working as a messenger for Hubbard think? What was the reason Hubbard was the source of everything?
Well, at that time, he wasn't source. He was the founder. And it was more of he did research and he worked it out to make it a workable process. And he didn't say he was source. He said he was the founder, and he just put it and made it workable. And that was fine. And then in late 73 is when I noticed the difference. He had a motorbike accident. And then as he was recovering from that, he sent out source missions, and he became source.
What's a source mission?
A source mission is where we had missionaries go out to all the orgs around the world with briefing packets on Hubbard as to who he is. And the briefing was how he was source, and here's his medals, here's all his different achievements. And that was done in all the orgs. And each mission, and this is interesting, each mission was based off of applause. When they did an event briefed everyone on L. Ron Hubbard and what kind of a man he was and all his accomplishments, they had to record how long people applauded clapping to his picture.
No way.
And that's where it started from.
They would audio record it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's when they first started doing the applause. 3 cheers to LRH.
Yes.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
That was in 1974.
So something changed at that point.
Yeah.
I wonder what it was.
Yeah.
So before that point, you didn't necessarily, Scientology was much less of a cult of personality, you would say?
Yeah. After Hubbard died, it just got out of control. On any freedom you did have as a Sea Org member was gone. As Miscavige took more and more control, it became a thing of where it's like, wait a minute, nobody agreed to this. They came in believing that every 2 weeks they get 2 days off. You got certain things, and you got your meals, and you got your bed, and you had your schedule and 8 hours sleep. And then it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was like, this, though I signed a SEAL contract at 11 years old so I could stay on the ship, it wasn't the same. Yeah, we had some rough times on the ship, but man, it got worse. It was the good old days on the ship.
It's amazing to think that living on that crappy, it was probably the biggest Sea Org ship, but it was still a piece of crap, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it was horrible.
And it was still full of crap when we took it over because it had been a cattle boat.
It was literally full of horse shit. Okay, so you're 11 years old when you get to the Apollo, you sign your Sea Org contract. So was your mom already in Scientology when you were born?
Yeah.
Oh, so what year did she get in then?
She got in 1953, 54.
Wow. So 53 might have even before there even was actually a Scientology, right?
It was Dianetics at the time. And she was a kindergarten director, and her assistant had the Dianetics book and self-analysis. And mom got interested in it, and dad was like, well, nothing to do with it. And then they finally convinced him to come to one little thing, and it was a lecture on self-analysis. And he was doing the drills on self-analysis, and they told him about past lives, and that's when it clicked for him. And from that day forward to the day he died, he was a believer in Scientology.
Wow.
And he was one of the biggest lecturers in the throughout the 60s and 70s.
And he only died recently, right?
Yeah, he died 2 years ago at 93 years old.
Wow.
So he'd been in Scientology over 60 years.
So when your mom went off, you're 11 years old, your mom essentially, joins the Sea project at that time. Was she divorced from your father at this point?
They were separated,
Okay.
not divorced, but separated.
Okay. What was your understanding? I mean, I'm asking you these questions. I realize you're an 11-year-old child. There's not a lot of computing going on at that time. But what was either your or your mom's understanding of why were they joining this Sea thing? Project, Sea Org? What was the reason?
To clear the planet.
It was to clear the planet.
To clear the planet.
What did that mean to you?
And then it changed to get ethics in on the planet.
Right.
Yeah.
As a precursor to clearing the planet.
Yes.
What did clearing the planet mean to you?
Well, I'd been at St. Hill. I grew up, in our house. We had a course room. There was auditing going on. I grew up with it. It was a normal thing. So when I got to St. Hill, they had the clearing course, and people were being announced, oh, so-and-so just went clear, or my mother went clear, or, and it was supposed to be, the mind is cleared, you don't have that reactive mind anymore. And that was what I thought. And so it would be clearing the planet. No one has a reactive mind, and we'd all have a happy life together.
So literally, in order to accomplish that, you'd have to have at least half to all. I'm adding the half, but at least half to all of the people on Earth actually attesting to the state of Scientology clear, right? That's literally what they're trying to do.
Now, I had talked to, to try and understand later on where my mother was at on this. Why would she even be in Los Angeles for all those years with her children on the ship and accept being separated from them? Because here's a woman who loved kids. She was a kindergarten teacher.
Right.
But Kimma Douglas, who had also deserted her child to join the Sea Org, explained to me, and she said, you got to realize at that time, the Iron Curtain was up. The war in Vietnam was going on. And the future did not look bright. There was the atomic bombs, so it was like, okay, we got to go and to give our children a better life. We need to get in to help clear the planet and get ethics in so that when they are older, they can have a better world.
They're being the martyrs.
Yes.
For the good of all mankind.
Exactly.
And they truly believed it. Wow. So when's the last time you saw L. Ron Hubbard?
I last saw him in December 1979 because I went on leave to Australia. And when I came back, most of the messengers with WDC were in Los Angeles at the time, and he was still at X in Hemet. And so there was a few messengers up there, but the majority were in LA. And so I just joined the group in LA and didn't go back to Hemet until much later. And then around February 1980, I think it was, was when he left with Annie and Pat.
So did you, when LRH was at X, did you interact with him there?
Yes.
And help me understand, because I know where Gilman Hot Springs is. I know where Hemet is. Where's X? Where was X?
X was an apartment building in Hemet, right behind McDonald's.
Oh, so it was really.
It was. Yeah,
okay. It was in Hemet.
It was in Hemet, right off of Florida.
Behind McDonald's. I always think those are funny examples of LRH not living the life of a gazillionaire at that time.
Well, you know, it's like it was a 2-story apartment building with a courtyard in the middle. So all the rooms were down the sides on 2 floors. And he had his room and Mary Sue had hers. And no, Mary Sue wasn't there. Mary Sue was in LA. But Kim and Mike had their place and David Mayo had his, you know, and the Messengers had their rooms. And there was only like 4 what we called WOGs, which is someone who was not a Scientologist. So 4 non-Scientologists living in this whole place. And Hubbard was working on editing his different tapes to, you know, edit out any crackles or different things like that, just to clean them up. And he would sometimes get into a fit of anger over some of this. And I'm like, oh my God, will you please keep it down? We got these people here. You know, it embarrassed me because I'd never seen anyone in my life. I have since then, but at that time, having grown up with it, I'd never seen anyone else, you know, get so mad about something. And it became embarrassing for me with these people who weren't part of our group seeing it.
Right. Incredible. What was your understanding of why L. Ron Hubbard needed to be so secretive about his whereabouts?
Yeah. Well, he had been kicked out of Rhodesia. Scientology had been banned in Victoria, Australia, which is why we initially left. He was an unwanted immigrant in England. He was avoiding the IRS and the FDA in America. So what do you do?
But did you know that at the time?
No.
Like, are you saying that with the benefit of hindsight, or is that what you thought then?
No, what I thought then was it was because, you know, he was this brilliant man with this technology that people were after, and that he's been attacked for his knowledge, you know, and I learned all that other stuff later. Oh,
so you did though have the understanding that part of the reason for this was avoidance of attacks?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, because
not because he needed to be in solitude to work on the OT levels or anything.
No. No, it was to avoid attacks because I grew up with that on the ship as we got kicked out of different ports. You know, it was, well, and we were usually kicked out for trying to interfere with the government. but it wasn't seen that way.
Just usually.
And you know, when we were in, when he had his motorbike accident, I was with him. When he came back, I could see something was wrong, and I ran down the gangway, and little me trying to hold up the bike until his transportation guy came and got it from me, but I could see he was injured. And he said to me later on, he said, Mary Sue had just told me I was no longer allowed in Spain. Oh. And he said, I'm obviously PTS to the situation. So he acknowledged that he could be PTS, which means you have suppressives affecting you, and so you're a potential trouble source. This is Scientology terms. And yeah, so he admitted that. And so, yeah, there he was now kicked out of Spain, which Spain had been one of the ports that we used to go to. And, you know, we got kicked out of several.
And so how did the Apollo go about trying to interfere with local governments? Well,
the worst one was Morocco.
That
was terrible. The ship had to go to dry dock.
Okay.
So Hubbard was going to take a 3-week leave, and go to his villa in Tangiers and stay there for 3 weeks while the ship went off to dry dock. Once it got to Lisbon, it needed longer time in dry dock and wet dock before it could be occupied by us. So we ended up staying in Tangiers from September until early December. He lived in a villa and we lived in an old college that we'd purchased. And before we'd done that, he had gotten everyone on the ship who spoke French to learn how to sec check.
Okay.
Because what had happened is there had been an attempted coup on the king of Morocco.
Mm.
So we were going to send in a mission of sec checkers to sec check the military to find out who is behind this coup.
Really?
Yes. And this is all in my books. Anyway, so the sec checkers are sec checking away, and they're writing down their list of the names that come up as to who were the masterminds behind the coup. And then one of our guys had a list, and he wanted to present it to the king. Well, he didn't realize the man he was presenting it to was on the list.
Oh my God.
So I'm on watch with Hubbard at the villa. On watch means I'm with him for my 6 hours.
Yeah.
And the phone rings. And I'm like, the phone's ringing. I'm looking at Hubbard. I'm like, who would be calling here? So he says, go ahead and answer it. So I answer the phone, and it's the mission in charge in Rabat. And he basically says, I need to talk to the Commodore right away. So I hand the phone to him, and basically we're told that it's blowing sky high, that this list was given, and they know what we were doing, and we have the names. And while he was on the phone, he turned to me and he says, get Andre to pack my bags. So I go get Andre, and he's packing his bags. And Andre we're in Tangier, so Andre drives him down to Casablanca, and they get a hotel for the night because he couldn't get a flight until the morning to Lisbon, to where the ship is. And that's when he flew over to Lisbon, was there for a few days, and then he took off to New York for 9 months.
Oh, is that where you see the photos of him with the long hair and everything?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, and that was part of his
Yes.
incognito.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did LRH get his sec checkers in a position to be able to start interrogating the king's people?
Well, we had some really good PRs, ship PRs people, and they spoke French, and, we'd been building it for years. For a couple of years, we'd been going to Morocco and doing safe port things and meeting the officials and getting involved with these people. And we'd have parties, and all these local officials would come to the ship, and people just loved us.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, they did.
Wow.
And we'd every weekend we'd open up the ship for tours, and the locals would come aboard and be given tours of the whole ship. And there's a lot of PR area control that was done that the locals really liked us.
Wow.
Yes.
It's amazing to think that back at that time, someone could actually have success creating good PR for Scientology when, today you couldn't have more toxic PR.
It wasn't for Scientology.
Oh.
They didn't know we were a Scientology ship. We'd been called the mystery ship.
Oh, I see.
But
the PR was for the ship itself.
The PR was for the ship itself. And, and that's why the musicians, the Apollo Stars music band was set up. We were in Madeira, and the mayor of Funchal asked if we had any musicians aboard to put on a concert. And so all these musicians got together and started jamming and figuring out different songs and put on a performance. And it was like, oh, come back again. And so that's how that started. And then it became a PR area control of all the locals knew us. And every port we went to, you go down to the port gates and you just go, Apollo. And they just walk you through. You didn't have to show any papers or anything.
Wow. That's incredible. So if the PR was for the ship itself, if people in Morocco loved you guys but didn't even necessarily know anything about Scientology,
right?
did L. Ron Hubbard personally just offer, like, who did he offer this help to? Hey, we're going to help find out who was behind the coup.
Well, he did that through the PRs.
Oh.
Who all had connections. You know, I mean, we had people. We did have one of our PRs who, the story that I was told is he did get to the king, rolled up in a rug. He was rolled up on a rug and carried into the palace. That way he could get through because no one would let him into the king.
Oh, I thought it was a punishment. He was sneaking in a
he
rug.
Was sneaking in a
rug.
rug.
My God. And then what happened?
Well, I don't know. I never got into the details.
No one ever saw him again.
No, they did. And he's still alive today.
Oh my God, who is it?
But he's still in good standing.
Who is it?
I'm not going to.
He's in good standing. There's nothing. There's nothing wrong with saying his name.
Well, I never saw it myself. It's just what I was told.
Okay.
His name was Riggs Eckleberry.
Riggs Eckleberry.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's a chance Riggs Eckleberry snuck in to see the King of Morocco rolled up in a rug.
Yes.
Okay. Did it ever turn out that that guy who was on the list was actually behind the coup?
Yes. You know, I put as much details in my book as I could. You know.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, it's in the book.
Oh my God. So if people ever wonder, can you actually use that e-meter as an effective interrogation tool? Yes, you can. That's incredible. So then, okay, so now your book starts out with, is it you being held against your will?
Yes.
Okay, and so let's just describe that scenario. What's happening in that opening scene of your book?
Okay. You know, there was a whole campaign to find all the List 1 RSs. Now, a List 1 RSer there is a List 1. And on that list is like Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, Mary Sue Hubbard, all these things that are key things for Scientology. And you get sec checked, or they just go through that list and go for the e-meter reaction. And it says you have evil purposes if you rock slam on the e-meter. So
just real quick,
okay.
So if anyone just wants to Google what a Scientology e-meter looks like, I mean, I'll probably put a photo of it right here or wherever. If that needle violently slashes back and forth, that is called a rock slam, and it's supposed to indicate that you have evil intentions on whatever it is that's being discussed.
Right.
I am still of the firm belief that there has never been a rock slam that was not caused by an electrical fault.
And that's what I felt.
Yes. Okay. Because it's insane.
Exactly. I felt it was.
Literally, there's no such thing. But Hubbard said that this meant you had evil intentions.
Exactly.
And so, okay, so Hubbard was searching out for any Sea Org members who had evil intentions essentially on him or Scientology.
Right. But what happened with me, so if you did something and you messed up something, you got sec checked. So that happened with me where we were doing a shoot, a cine shoot. And I had driven the car following his car, and I had the messengers with me. And we got to the shoot, which was down a gully and, you know, in some bushes. So I put the keys to the car and my purse in his motorhome, thinking, oh, we'll be going in there for lunch. Well, when the shoot was over and we're ready to go back, the motorhome had already gone to the next location with my purse and the car keys. So I couldn't take anyone to the next shoot. So I then had to catch a ride, and everyone else did too, to go to the next shoot to get my keys. And while he was having lunch, he asked where I was and found out I was off. I had to go back to get the car. Mm. So he got mad at me for that. And I was assigned a condition of liability, and which meant I had to do 12 hours of amends, and I asked permission to rejoin the group because I'd messed up. And then it was ordered that I be sec checked. And that's when it was said that I had evil purposes against Mary Sue. Mm. I mean, you know, Mary Sue, I was probably the messenger that got along with her best. But anyway, so I was then assigned to the RPF because that's where people go to handle their evil purposes. And the RPF is the Sea Org prison camp. So I was assigned that, and I refused to go. So I was put under guard, and I was kept away from everyone else so I wouldn't upset everybody else, that I didn't want to be a part of their group in the RPF. And I was under guard in the driveway, and I'd walk back and forth in the driveway, and the guard would walk back and forth with me, and then I'd break into a run and then panic thinking I was going to take off down the road. Anyway, so finally I decided I'm going to go see Maria Starkey, who was in charge of everything. And I just started walking off, and the guy in charge of the RPF panicked, and he started coming after me. And I tell the story here where he put his hand on me and I slapped him and told him to keep his filthy mitts off me. And then he called for an HCO bring order and had 6 big guys, big hefty guys, come on down, and they kept me under guard while they got a room ready. And then what it was just a little hallway with a bathroom. And they took me in there, and I thought, I was going in to see Maria. And they locked me in there. And then in this room is a mattress on the floor, blankets, pillow, and the bathroom. And I was locked in there, and and there was a guard outside. And I was in there for 11 days.
Oh my God.
And an auditor would come in and try and audit me. And one day they poked their head in, and they came in and looked all around. And I'm like, what's going on? Oh, never mind. And they go out. Well, I found out my guard blew. He left in the middle of the night.
Your guard himself escaped.
If they're treating Janis like this, who's one of the senior messengers,
wow,
what else would they do?
Wow.
So he took off. And so they were checking to see if he was inside with me. Anyway, so I was in there for 11 days. And then Mary Sue wrote me. And I figured LRH must have told her, because she was in LA under her own court case for the FBI raid. So she was down there handling her own court case, and she wrote me a letter, and LRH and her wrote every day. So I knew that he had told her that I was there. And she wrote me a letter, and it was her letter that convinced me to stay. And I didn't have anywhere to go anyway. I was 21 years old. My mother had passed away. My father was in good standing. I'd never been out there in the WOG world, the non-Scientology world. So her letter kind of convinced me, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to just accept it and buckle down.
What did she say?
She just talked about purpose and how long I've been around and the trust, and the short period to get through the RPF compared to 1 billion years is nothing.
Sound logic.
Right.
There's something about this story that really blows my mind. So LRH knew that this was happening to you.
Yes.
He knew that it all started with you simply leaving your purse in his RV.
Yes.
A simple, not even mistake. It wasn't a mistake to do that. Okay. But then it spirals, it progresses or degenerates into you being assigned a lower condition, getting a sec check. Now, all of a sudden, the E-meter says you have evil purposes on Mary Sue. Now, to be clear, this isn't because you said you did. It's because the auditor said the E-meter said you did.
Exactly.
And so this is the part where we get to the part that actually truly blows my mind. L. Ron Hubbard and Mary Sue, who've known you at this point since you're 11, you're their biggest
10 years
advocate, servant, whatever, supporter. They believe that you have evil purposes because some douchebag auditor reports that the E-meter says that you do.
Yes.
And treat you accordingly.
Yes.
Regardless of their personal experience with you. So when Mary Sue intervenes, it's not to be like, hey, you guys are insane for thinking Janis has evil purposes against me. It's to convince you to do the RPF to handle your evil purposes.
Yes.
That is the part that blows my mind.
Yes.
That is the part that blows my mind.
Yes. Well, and then when it was finally, and it was Kimmer who said to LRH, something is wrong here. The percentages are off. It's only supposed to be 2%, but nearly everyone is going the RPF. And that's when he decided to look into it. And it was Kimmer that pointed it out.
The fact that it didn't even occur to L. Ron Hubbard.
Right.
That his own dictates and his own orders and his own policies were all completely out of whack with each other.
Exactly.
And he was taking the word of this e-meter over his own intuition. He's supposed to be the one who's full OT.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be the one who's source.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's letting an e-meter tell him who his friends are. That it really does blow my mind.
Yeah.
You know, I guess I've never quite thought of it that way before. Did it blow your mind at the time?
You know, I felt very betrayed.
Mm.
Very betrayed, because after 10 years of being with him, close to, except for when I was on Liberty or I was sent on mission, I was with him 6 hours a day for 11 years.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how deep into the book this story is. Is this right in the beginning relatively? Because I remember reading this part of your book, and what struck me was the contradiction that if LRH was a compassionate, caring guy who believed in his tech and that the tech could, you know, could remedy all problems, you'd think that the people closest to Hubbard would have been treated the best, or had the best application, or the most charitable or compassionate application of the tech possible. And yet it was reading your book that made me first go, God, the people who were closest to LRH got it the worst.
Yeah. It got, the higher you went up the org board, the worse it got. But you know, yeah. But now, yeah, the book, I used that 11 days in isolation as to go into the rest of my book, as in, how did I get here? And these two books actually only cover the days on the ship, except for those 11 days.
Mm.
And the third book I'm working on will cover our moving to America, and then different locations in America, and the films, and Hubbard leaving, and all that kind of stuff, and the rest of this incident.
Mm. So let's fast forward real quick to, so what we've covered is, we've covered up to the point where you want to leave, but Mary Sue convinces you to stay.
Right.
And I presume you do the RPF at that point.
Yes.
Fast forward however many years to when you arrive to a place mentally, personally, spiritually, where you're like, I'm done with this. What brought that about?
You know, I did the mission to set up the maiden voyage of the Free Winds. There was nobody else around that, you know, that really knew ships and could be the missionary at sea and run everything. So I was selected, and I had like 12 missionaries underneath me to pull off the maiden voyage back in 1988. And when DM arrived with the rest of the senior, you know, RTC execs, I noticed how they treated the crew in comparison to the public.
Mm.
And my view, which I've always looked at, is, wait a minute, in Scientology, the staff members should be senior to the public, not treated so poorly, where the public were being praised and treated better than the people who have dedicated their lives and their volunteering.
Mm.
And that rubbed me wrong when I saw that. Because, you know, meanwhile, for all those other years, you know, because after, what was that, 1978, and I left in 1990, those years, yeah, I reworked my way back up and so forth, and I'd get declared and work my way back up, but I stuck it out. And then by that point, it didn't care anymore. I was so toughened that I had no emotions anymore. Even to the point where they try to comev me and they call me to a comev, and I'm like, I'm not showing up. And they're like, you have to show up. You're going to be declared. I'm like, well, declare me. And they couldn't do anything about that. And that's when I was like, I'm done with this game. And then I got pregnant. And I'd seen what happened with other women. I'd been in that boat, and I'm like, I'm not going there again. So when we had the flood in August 11, 1990, and DM standing up there on the stage like a madman, I looked at Paul and I said, I'll take the car. And he said, I'll take the bike.
Really?
Because we lived off base at Kirby and Hemet.
And so this is the flood that washed out the cabanas that Tom Cruise was supposed to stay at and everything? Okay.
Yes. So, and at that time, I thought I was pregnant. And Paul was the only person I told. I was not going to tell anybody else. And I was going to go see my aunt and uncle who had come over from Australia. And because gold was signed a condition, Paul was told he couldn't go with me. So the next night, when everyone was being called into the base at 11 o'clock at night for a drill, we loaded up the car and never looked back.
Wow. And how old were you at that time?
34.
So at 34 years old. And how old would Paul have been at that time? 34. Oh, wow. And had he pretty much been in his whole life as well?
No, he got in when he was like 20.
Oh, okay. So he at least had some.
He got into Scientology at 20, and he joined the Sea Org probably at 24.
So he had some real world experience. Yeah. Okay. And so you guys went from Scientology being your everything for decades to out into the wild.
Yeah. We were married 11 years in there, and then we went out, and it was like a whole new world. And you can't, you think of your friends who have already left, but they've gotten back in good standing, and they can't help you because.
That's all right.
I want to just shut it off. They can't help you because that would get them in bad standing or pulled into ethics. And we didn't have much money. We didn't have jobs. We had no resume, no credit. And I show up at my brother's, who I hadn't seen in 8 years because he had left earlier. And I called Marshall Goldblatt. And Marshall was a wealthy Scientologist that had loved my mom and worked for her. And he'd helped get the various different buildings and stuff like that. I called Marshall and I said, Marshall, I've left. I'm pregnant. I have some of those ASI paintings, prints. Yeah. And I'm like, will you buy them?
The Frazettas?
Yeah.
The Frank Frazettas?
Yes, I had some of those. And I'm like, I don't want money just given to me. I've got it. I want an exchange. Will you buy them from me? So he did. And he wired me some money. And then my sister tried to do the same thing. He was like, sorry, I can't do that. I already got in trouble for helping Jan. So anyway, that's how I got some money to at least help us get out, feet on the ground.
So your sister left after you?
She left before me.
Oh, she left before you, but you did the Frank Frazetta thing first.
Yes.
How long before you did she leave?
She left in January and I left in August.
Wow. So, but was that a big deal for you when she left?
It was kind of a relief when she left because then I was the only one left. There was no one now there that could hold me in.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, because.
So now when you're ready to go, there was nothing holding you.
Right, because if I had left before her, they would have used her to bring me back in. So
by the time when she left in January, were you already like, oh, okay, I'm next?
Yeah, well, an interesting thing. I went back and just after she left, they sent me back to the Free Winds to take over as commanding officer because Milton Wolfe was in trouble for gambling and drinking. So I did another 3 months on the Free Winds.
Were you taking over for the ship org or the service org?
Both.
Oh my God.
I was in charge of the whole ship.
Really?
Yeah.
You were the captain Free Winds?
Not the captain. I was over the captain.
Oh, okay.
I was the boss of the captain and the commanding officer of the service org.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah,
okay.
so I had to coordinate the both.
Got it.
And so I was at the Free Winds and Paul got in trouble. And he had called me from Clearwater and said, don't listen to anything they say. They're pulling me back. I said DM was the who of the episode.
Oh, that's amazing.
So when I was leaving the ship, they put a security guard on me. And I'm like, I'm not the one in trouble. But they got a security guard on me.
Oh my God.
Who went with me all the way from Aruba all the way back to LA.
Wow.
And when we were in Miami, that's where I was like, how could I shake this guy? You know, I could get to a payphone and call my sister, who I knew was in Florida. But I couldn't, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have beepers in those days. You know, so I went to the bathroom hoping he wouldn't be there when I came out. And he was there. So I couldn't shake him anyway. That's when but it got me thinking.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how hard was it to transition to life in the outside world?
It was interesting. I thought it would be hard, but it just took a lot of stepping out of my comfort zone and just pushing myself. You know, we had someone who was an ex-Scientologist who heard we'd left, and he contacted our dad to contact us, and he wanted to set up a mortgage company in Las Vegas. I didn't even know what a mortgage was. So, okay, off we go to Las Vegas. And we set up the mortgage company, and I start learning, you know, mortgages and how it all worked and building credit. And there was 5 of us in a little apartment, and I'm pregnant. And we're making like $1,000 a month or something ridiculous, but we're all chipping in. And it was just pushing mentally that you could do it. And there were times we'd tell someone something, and, you know, I would use Scientology terms because Scientology was my first language. I grew up with all those terms that, you know, people are like, what the hell are you saying? And I use those terms, our ethics, you know, or whatever. And people go, what? And my sister and I go, oh, that's Australian.
Oh, that's great. That's
We didn't tell anyone about our past. We were so embarrassed about it.
Smart.
You know, and it wasn't until November 2009, the Tampa Tribune put out an article saying what happened in Vegas.
The Tampa Bay Times?
The Tampa Bay Times, yeah. And only when that newspaper article came out did it kind of release me, where, okay, the secret's out of the box now. And then I could finally start talking about it.
Wow.
But all my friends before that never knew.
You're kidding.
No, they didn't know.
So for 20 years?
For nearly 20 years.
Oh my God.
They didn't, they had no idea.
Did you just not want them to know?
Yeah, it was embarrassing.
Oh.
But, and you know, we had PIs. The church, Scientology, had put PIs in to our mortgage company. We had one loan officer, his name was Dave LeBeau.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think we were we were probably his first assignment. And so he comes in saying, hey, I want to be a loan officer. I see you're hiring. So, okay, we hire him. And he's the one who orchestrated getting my sister and brother-in-law to Australia so that they were out of the country by the time DM walked into the IRS and worked out that deal.
Oh, right. So Scientology orchestrated this dream job at like a horse farm or ranch in Australia to get your sister out of the country.
Yes.
Because she and her husband knew some stuff that could torpedo the IRS deal.
Probably.
Or Miscavige was worried she'd create waves.
Yes.
And he's trying to close this IRS tax exemption.
Yes.
Right.
So, you know, they go off to Australia. Now it's just Paul and I, you know, and our little mortgage company. And Dave is still there.
Oh, that's right. Because at this time, you and your sister and are like the highest level defectors that there are.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And we had this growing mortgage company, and we just wanted to get on with our lives. You know, I had a young son by now, and it's like, we need to just concentrate. We are all these years behind on building credit, building savings, you know, everything. We couldn't afford a house. We couldn't even afford a down payment or anything like that. You know, when we left, no one would touch us credit-wise. Mm. So, you know, and luckily there were some Scientologists who were on the fence, I guess. They'd contacted me and heard I was pregnant, and they sent me baby things from their own kids. And that's what helped me, you know, manage. Mm. Because, yeah, we had nothing.
Wow.
And anyway, so this loan officer, Dave LeBeau, Terry's now gone, and he sits around and doesn't close any deals. And he had introduced us to another mortgage broker, and we'd become good friends, and we'd done deals together. And I was talking to Jack one day, and I said, Jack, is Dave bringing you deals? And Jack's like, no. Why? And I said, well, he's not closing anything with us, so I'm wondering how he's being supported.
Oh.
And Jack had been hanging out with Dave, going to bars and drinking and stuff like this. And so Jack got to know Dave real well. And Dave lived across the parking lot from us at our apartment building. So Jack says, oh, no, he's here on a job. He's not a real loan officer. I said, what kind of job? He says, he's a private investigator. He's here in town on a case. I'm like, oh, yeah, tell me more.
And Jack doesn't know anything about you in Scientology?
Nothing about us in Scientology.
Oh.
He's oblivious to it. I said, oh, yeah? How do you know that? He said, oh, he showed me his badge, his gun, the listening equipment he uses to listen in on their phone calls.
Oh, my God.
Because he's across the parking lot from us.
Oh, my God.
And he'd given Fernando as a birthday present
Fernando's...
a cordless phone, my brother-in-law. Mm. So I'm like, ding, ding, ding. You know, everything's confirming and falling into place. That this guy is a PI sent in by Scientology.
How long had he been working for you at this point?
I don't know.
3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years?
No, months. Yeah, and you look at all of our pictures when we'd all go out to eat. There he is sitting in the middle of it, you know.
But not years?
No, not years.
Okay.
No, well, maybe a year.
A year, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so we were like, okay, don't tell him. Keep your enemies close, you know. So.
Oh, yeah. So did you feed him some counter-espionage stuff?
We just went about our lives, you know.
Oh, really?
We just didn't. What's he going to say?
Right.
We weren't committing any crimes. We weren't doing anything stupid.
Better to have the guy there and you know he's there than wonder who the next guy's going to be.
Exactly. Well, then the next guy does show up.
Oh, for real?
For real.
So, but what got your antenna up is this dude's not closing any deals.
Yeah.
So he blew his own cover by just slacking off, not doing anything, but somehow supporting himself.
Well, he had a wife in California.
Oh, my goodness.
He had a wife in California and kids. And he starts going out with one of the wholesale reps.
Oh.
And he's like, and we're like, how can you live if you're not closing deals? Oh, my wife has a trust. Okay, she has a trust, but she's working at a maitre d' as a maitre d' at a restaurant.
Oh, so his cover story was terrible.
And you're in Vegas messing around with other women.
So he probably didn't have a wife, right?
He did.
Oh, he really did?
She came into town with the kids.
Oh.
And we took him out to see the horses and, you know, we got photographs of them all.
So he's just generally terrible at his job.
Exactly. He blew his own cover. Yeah. He blew his
Not
own
only
cover.
did he make you suspicious, but he spilled the beans to Jack.
Yeah. Well, even my sister, when she was down in Florida, down in Australia, you know, she's like, where are the microphones?
Wow. Well, and for the viewers, Mike Rinder just posted a video to his YouTube channel, which I'll post a little link to up here, of Dave LeBeau as a Scientology PI following Mike and following Marty, and got him on camera saying, hello, Mike and Marty, I'm here to follow you and see what you're doing, like doing a noisy investigation, right? So I wonder, I doubt Miscavige still uses LeBeau for anything. He seems to.
Yeah, no, I think he's blowing his cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And so the mortgage business, that's what you still do to this day.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am still a licensed mortgage broker. And you know what's interesting is after I did the Leah Remini show, I was on the Where's Shelley episode. Someone put out a video on me, as in Janis Grady out of mothballs. And I have my suspicions, of course. And in that, it actually says that it goes on about what a bad person I am and how Paul and I lost our mortgage license for fraud. Well, I look at that, I'm like, okay, I never lost my license. I'm still a licensed mortgage broker. At the time they put it out, I was the president of the Nevada Association of Mortgage Professionals and the chairman of the Mortgage Advisory Council to the state of Nevada.
Wow.
And here they are trying to say I'd lost my mortgage license for fraud.
Just totally lying.
Oh, total lies.
So what did you get your own website, or did they just put that video up on one of their hate channels? Did they did they have whoisjanisgillhamgrady.com?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
No, I think they do have whoisjanisgrady.com.
Okay.
Yeah, because I tried to get in, they already had it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, they might have purchased it, but do they have a website up?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not, I don't care.
Well, AaronSmith-Levin.com is a website by Scientology.
You're up on me.
I see. I bought the Who is Aaron Smith-Levin.
Yeah.
For some reason, it didn't occur to me to buy Aaron Smith-Levin because they've never done that to anybody before.
Oh.
They just never done that to anybody. They always did the Who is. Anyway, so that was stupid. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here. You not only have the first book, which is called, they've got the same title.
Well, this is
that might hurt you on sales.
No, a child adrift in the Scientology Sea organization.
Okay.
And it says book 1 here, and this is me.
I'll show I'll do a little close-up image and put it on there.
And then this is book 2, and here it's writing out the storms with L. Ron Hubbard.
Got it. And that's also you look just like Juliette Lewis in that photo. Anyone ever tell you that?
No.
Okay. And so you're working on a third book as well?
I'm working on the third book because these take us all the way through the 8 years on the ship. And, you know, my parents in Scientology and St. Hill and all that stuff. And then my third book will pick up moving to Clearwater and then LRH going off to DC and off to LA and setting up in La Quinta and then in Gilman Hot Springs.
Nice.
And as far as that goes.
Nice. I don't think I've read the second one yet, but now I will. Oh, so you got the audiobook for this one?
Yes, there is an audio
for part
book.
1.
Yes, and these are sold on Amazon.
Okay, but no audiobook yet for book 2?
Right. I've got to figure out how I can do that.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to work my way through number 2 and then let me know when number 3 is available.
Okay, I'll do that.
This has been a lot of fun. And when you got the third book out, let's do another chat.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right